Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Accelerator with Michael Conniff. That's me, your host. We're a podcast that is just about everywhere. We're on a Substack newsletter account where you can subscribe and get it in your mailbox. About 8,000 people do that every week. We are also on YouTube and Spotify, full motion video, as we call it, and audio, and then on all the major audio podcast platforms, Audible, Amazon, Apple, many others, about a dozen in all. So it's great to be here with you, and I am very excited to welcome our host, Mark Gold. Mark is the Managing Director of 2020 Startups and the Head of Digital Transformation at Gracie Mansion Conservancy. So welcome, Mark. You're a busy man. It's great to it's nice of you to squeeze this in.
Thank you, Michael. I'm really excited about this. Thank you.
So I have to mention, as I think I did when we first talked, I actually know what Gracie Mansion is. I grew up directly across the street from Gracie Mansion. It's where the mayor of New York, I guess, used to live or still lives, but it's in Carl Schurz Park on East End Avenue and off East End Avenue, and it's where I grew up. And I don't want to belabor that, other than to say that I grew up in the 60s in an apartment on the fourth floor. We could look out every day. There was a different protest against Mayor Lindsay. It was the 60s. Every day it was something. There was always people there, so it was really active.
There was probably more parking there as well.
Yeah, maybe. But Mark is incredibly busy. He's been he was just telling me, and I said, stop, Mark, you got to save that for the podcast. You tell me where you were 8 years ago.
So 8 years ago, I launched the first non-equity accelerator program in partnership with the city of New York. It was specifically with Downtown Alliance, who received a $1.2 million grant, I believe from ESD or EDC, one of those. But essentially, it was a grant to create a Lower Manhattan tech hub or entrepreneurial hub. And very quickly, after the 12,000 square feet was set up, and it was at 150 Broadway, the 20th floor. Quickly, I began to realize that you can stuff hundreds, if not thousands, of entrepreneurs and founders into a room or into a stadium. But if there's no guidance, if there's no mentorship, if there aren't any resources that are available, that are practical, that will help your company not only scale, but be a viable product market fit, it's just not going to work. And that's how 2020 Startups was born. In order to get to the 20th floor at 150 Broadway, you had to press the elevator code 2020 pound. And from my marketing mindset, I thought, wait a minute, 2020 means vision, and it's visionary. We want to work with visionary founders and visionary entrepreneurs. And that's kind of how 2020 Startups was born.
And so you did this I guess we call it a nonprofit city based in Lower Manhattan, kind of an unusual setup. But you found that people were just in desperate need, probably, of mentorship, of advisors, of how do I do this? And so that led you. Did I paraphrase that about right? And also, what did that make you want out of 2020 Startups?
So what I realized was that at that point was probably a little bit over 10 years of experience, specifically with integrated marketing. I work with small businesses, with agencies. And so I realized really quickly that, and there's a lot of data on this, that typically 9 out of 10 startups fail in the first year. And it's usually 90% marketing related, whether they don't understand the market or it's a lack of market product fit, or they don't have a marketing budget, whatever it might be. There's data out there that was showing it's 90% of marketing. And I just saw an opportunity to plug in my network to not only be relevant for my network, but to also build a community where entrepreneurs that typically may be underserved, that at that time, 2015, 2016, may not have even known what an accelerator is. And it was just something that I saw my marketing skills were in demand. And I created an accelerator program that focused really on integrated marketing.
So
And I could jump.
I'm going to stop you just for a second. Forgive me for interrupting, but it strikes me about that. Like you're talking about New York City, skyscrapers and everything. We're talking about one of the great cities in the world, and yet you came in and you found that for startups, there was something lacking. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and I believe that the New York City tech ecosystem is relatively new. So all the amazing resources that we see today is a combination of time and effort. It hasn't been here for years and years, and I've actually heard the story of how the tech system was or tech ecosystem was born in New York, and it was really on the on the heels of the 2007 financial crash when the city realized that we can't just rely on the financial market. And that really was the time that the city itself began focusing on creating this tech ecosystem. I don't know what it is today, but last year we had a little bit over 9,000 startups in New York City.
Is that right?
So
And how do you get a number like that? That's really interesting.
I had a fireside chat with Kristen Kaufman, who's the Deputy Commissioner of International Affairs at the mayor's office. And that was in May, I believe, of last year. And, she had told us in this fireside chat a lot of really cool data points about New York City and about a lot of really cool stories, the origin story of NYC Tech. Which was that what I had just said that I learned from her from 2007, financial crisis made the city, so on and so forth. And I still want to say that from what I've seen internationally and nationally, New York City is really up there in terms of resources, in terms of a hyper-developed ecosystem. And that's not to say that we are not fragmented and that we don't have areas to grow in. We do. And in fact, my team and I, and we love to say we love to innovate within innovation because there is a lot of room to grow. But we are really developed when it comes to helping startups. And I'd like to think that I was part of that legacy, so to speak, from 2016 onward. The companies that we would bring into the accelerator, they were not only tech. There were, a baked goods company that was serving, sugar-free and all these kind of really cool different types of treats. We brought them into Microsoft on Fifth Avenue and gave them kind of like a new tech community of customers. But long story short, it was really focused on the underdogs, the little guys, the people who didn't even have the ability to know where to start. Today we know there, the accelerator education, as I like to call it, we know if you need an advisor, you need an investor, you need a mentor. There are 3 or 4 things that every startup founder today focuses on, customers, revenue with customers, capital with investors, press, and community. So now we know, but back then we were just kind of writing this blueprint, and I saw an opportunity to bring in, my marketing background. And I think it really helped because we focused on improving go-to-marketing strategies. We focused on unique hybrid sessions that we can kind of disassemble your entire company in theory and then reassemble it, knowing certain facts or resources were available to you. If you're a startup today and you might have 2 customers, if I told you, hey, I have access to an email newsletter that has 30,000 potential customers for you, hey, that might make a difference for you. Or if I introduce you to an investor who is looking for your type of company, but you might not be investor ready, and I take the next 90 days to really prep you and help you, then of course it's going to make a difference. And and that's why today, 8 years later, instead of focusing on specific cohort education like accelerators typically do, post pandemic, 2020 startups decided that we are going to kind of be in the roadshow business. We want to take the companies, work with them for 90 days, and then we want to put them out there and get feedback from top level investors, top level tech executives, government leaders, which to our surprise, my surprise, actually a lot of them are angel investors that we didn't know.
Right.
So, yeah. Yeah.
So, tell me about that notion of working with companies. It sounds like they're very early. They're pre-seed, right? And they're pretty green. They really are not. They probably just have a feeling they want to be an entrepreneur and have their own company, and maybe the germ of an idea. So when you is how much of it is pairing them with the right advisors and mentors, and how much of it is raising money?
Every founder is different. And when it comes to raising money, there's a lot to be said about having a certain type of character. And I think that investors today really want to invest in a resilient founder who's agile, creative, isn't easily overwhelmed, knows how to delegate, knows how to not only build perhaps an advisory board or a board of directors, but to also manage that board, and a somewhat of a leader in training, so to speak, or a founder with a chip on their shoulder. They have something to prove. They're an underdog, et cetera, et cetera. What we found when you start looking at founders in that way, you start to see certain trends. As an example, a ton of Israeli startups have these type of founders, very resilient and agile, and they seem to be attracting a lot of investors in cybersecurity and AI, and so to speak, because there's a mindset that these type of founders are going to be able to make it through the dark times. And unfortunately, too many founders they may give up or might not have the right resources or even the right investors. Yeah. Sometimes we just don't have the right partners around us, and we can have an incredible product, but there's a lot to say about that. What was the second question?
Okay. So what about on the money side? I'm asking this question because I've heard, I think, something that really distinguishes founders. The great ones from the ones who are going to struggle is how they feel about not having enough money, but also having money for the company. So I've heard many times a founder will say, if I just had $10,000, if I just had $30,000, if I just had $100,000, I could do X, Y, Z. As I wouldn't exactly call it an excuse, because there is some reality. So those are the less successful. The more successful founders, they will mention that. They will say, I could use, X, Y, or Z. But their real mentality is like, I'm going to make this work no matter what. The resilience you're talking about. So even if they don't have exactly what they need, they plunge ahead, because really, isn't entrepreneurship, running your own company, isn't it about making do without having everything you need? You're
that short. That certainly becomes a superpower over time.
Yeah.
And I think that it's also important to look at early stage companies really in 3 different stages. That's the way we look at it at 2020 Startups. There's, they're all early stage companies, but there's early, mid early, and late early. And by just being able to kind of look at it from a bird's eye view from that perspective, we can compartmentalize what type of resources that founder company needs. Some may be in a position that they're post MVP and just need some capital to finish their tech development. Others might be in a place where they might need, $500,000 to become, to grab a significant amount of market share in a certain space that will make them viable and attractive. And then the later stage might just need 250,000 from an investor to close a $5 million round. So that's kind of easier when you bunch everyone into early stage. Sometimes we miss the real important factors of just in time resourcefulness or just in time education. So
yeah, no, great point. And so what do you do when they reach the end of your accelerator, so to speak? 90 days is fast.
yep.
So you mentioned you take them on the road. So what does that look like, and what has happened? Tell us about some of those experiences.
I'm glad you asked. So for the last 8 years or so, it's been really a combination of cohorts and events, demo days, and post COVID, it really developed into global tech summits where we've partnered with government agencies like the Canadian Consulate or Ontario, Canada, as an organization in New York. And we created kind of stepping stones to what today is the NYC Investor Roadshow, which we technically just launched in January of this year. And what we found is a lot of founders, whether they're early, mid-early, or late early, if their mindset has been educated, whether it's from an accelerator, from a mentor, from reading a book, if they are on a certain level of understanding and that they're coachable and they understand certain parts within that venture journey that they need to collaborate, work with all sorts of different partners, and they exhibit that type of leadership, then it becomes easier for them, so to speak, because they start attracting all sorts of investors and partners that want to invest in them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so what happens? Walk us through the NYC Roadshow.
Sure. So the NYC Investor Roadshow is a product of 2020 startups to raise awareness not only for our companies, but also to raise awareness of our rebranding. So what we realized and what we've been studying since 2019 in terms of New York City VC activity and even international VC activity, we've taken that data and we've really pushed it to understand that there is an element within entrepreneurial education that now we're all calling this new buzzword of upskilling. But we've been studying the effects of this and the pain points for founders, and now we're at a certain place where what we're doing with our rebranding is we're taking a 90-day program that has kind of sprinkled events here and there, and we're really institutionalizing it, and we're creating what we're calling the New York Startup School. And this is a place where we are creating a symbiotic business model, and essentially we understand the pain points of tech executives, of founders, and of investors. And we are kind of itemizing our solutions and offering it to all those three parties. And it's really becoming an interesting symbiotic community. And I can explain in various ways how we're doing that, but I think what's most important is the New York Startup School is focusing on upskilling the next generation of founders. Whether you're early or you're in Series B, there's a lot to be said about struggling founders, about emerging technology education. And as a founder, you have so many responsibilities. Even when you're venture backed, the stakes just get higher. Right? It doesn't necessarily get easier all around. It might get easier because now you have a budget and now you have more money, more resources to kind of push your weight. But it still is a challenge to appropriately scale, grow, and not misuse the funds or any other resources. So there are challenges in that sense. But overall, we are upskilling the next generation of founders. We are creating, instead of a 90-day program, we're creating an annual program. Our focus is we want to have skin in the game. In order for us to bring investors in and to kind of create a no toll community where we don't we don't charge fees from angel investors or VCs that want to invest in our companies. So no management fee for investors, which is something we believe is really big. Why should we penalize investors who want to help raise the valuation of this company or the share price, et cetera, et cetera? So our offer for the founders essentially is it's an annual program. There's about 96 live virtual sessions. 90% of it is remote. We're partnering up with chambers. We're partnering up with government agencies. And we're going directly to the founders. And then what founders love about this is it's continuous support. And they also love the faculty. So what we've done is we said, okay, you can learn from an accelerator. You can learn a university or a college has an online program, or you can take a master class. Those are limited and they usually don't have comprehensive support. And so what we've done is we've said we're going to incentivize the investors and the faculty and the founders. And so it's becoming, we have, thank God, and all of our partners, we're really gaining a lot of buzz. And I think it has to do with the fact that we've had a successful program for the last 8 years.
How do you incentivize them, Mark? And how do you define skin in the game? And what's the business model? Is another way to ask.
Perfect. So basically, as a founder, what we found through our research and data and years of experience is that, let's just say conservatively, 9 out of 10 founders would rather learn from the director of data science at American Express and have that one-on-one with him rather than learn from a professor of data science, even if it's in an Ivy League school. There's
I worked at American Express.
Oh, okay.
So I would agree with that. And in the old days, instead of upskilling, we would call it learning something new.
Yeah.
Same difference. So they want the real person in the real world who has the real job, who has the real responsibility to do what they're trying.
Yeah. And this tech executive essentially not only educates and has FaceTime with up and coming founders or with the founders in that class, but also. See, the tech executive kind of triple dips. They not only are a faculty instructor, but they also can become a one-on-one advisor. We're incentivizing that the tech executives could directly advise the companies in the program, and they could also.
How do you incentivize that? How do you make that happen?
Well, our faculty receives some shares of the companies that they're teaching, which I've been told is a pretty interesting and new, might even be a disruptive way of creating the symbiotic kind of business model. Because what happens is, as a founder, let's say you were the instructor for American Express, and I know as a founder, I'm not thinking as a student, I'm thinking as a founder, I'm thinking, okay, wait a minute, I have FaceTime with this person, they know about my company, I can make a good impression and potentially even say, okay, I'll give you 1 or 2 or 3% for you to be on my advisory board. So now what happens is the instructor is at a crossroads where they can decide, oh, I already have some shares of this company just by teaching them. I could potentially jump on their advisory board because I know what's under the hood. I believe in them. I like it. And then furthermore, if they reach certain milestones, that instructor not only becomes an advisor, but also can become an investor because, as we know, a lot of our faculty tech executives are also investors. So it becomes this trifecta for the founder.
For 2020 startups, how do you guys make money?
So 2020 startups, as we rebrand to the New York Startup School, there are.
So have you rebranded it as the New York Startup School?
Correct. Yes, we are in the process of rebranding it now, and part of this roadshow is part of raising awareness of our rebranding. And at the moment, we charge tuition for the year, and we take a 2% warrant from the company.
Okay.
So, and then what we do is we take half of that 2%, which is 1%, and we actually put it in an equity pool for investors in our community. So if they like what they see and they're already supporting the school, then they have a freeway to continuously invest in the company with no fees attached to it.
So
So
the 1%, they would essentially buy the 1% in the pool you described.
correct. Yes, they would buy units in the pool. So what we're doing essentially is we're giving away half of our equity pool to investors. And the point of that is that it's for founders by investors, and our faculty are investors, tech executives are investors. So for founders by investors, and accelerate with attitude, because we want to work with founders who are resilient and are looking to make a name for themselves.
I'm smiling, and of course, our Audible and audio podcast people can't see what we're doing, but I am smiling because I like that accelerate with attitude. So, what does that mean beyond like sort of being generally aggressive about your business?
Well, I think when we say attitude, we say, from our perspective, it's really about the character of the founder. It's not necessarily we want them to walk around and be aggressive and be conceited.
Mm-hmm.
It's really more about, in a humble way, conveying that you are intelligent and that you are knowledgeable about your market. Let's start from there. So
Yeah.
if you don't know, if you don't know your competitors, you don't even know what you would charge, you might be in uncharted territory. It might be possible, right? If you were the first rideshare company and you wanted, to take over a certain market, you might not know what to charge, granted. But in most cases, there are competitors or people who, or organizations that might slide into your lane. I would call them competitors as well. And I think that's important to validate what your market prices will be. We didn't just pull out $6,000 a year from left field. What we did was, is we said,
That's the tuition.
yeah, in our situation, an hour level, the comprehensive support, who's doing it, almost 80 or 90% of the alternative options of our upskilling are either charging more or not providing the comprehensive support that we are, by them immediately getting connected with a tech executive, an advisor,
Sure.
and an investor who happens to be the same person. But at the end of the day, they play three different parts for the scaling of the company.
Mark, we only have a couple minutes left. Tell us about, first of all, how many people are in the school, in the New York Startup School, but also tell us about a success story, a company you particularly like.
Sure. So as 2020 startups, we are basically, now that we've hit April, which is the 8th year, this is the month where we are essentially fading out 2020 and putting the New York Startup School into the spotlight. So for the last, I would say, 8 years, at least 300 companies. At some point, we just lost count, but we had 300 companies in the first 2.5 years. In the first 2 years, we hit over 150 companies. There's different success stories. There's Alice Chun from Solite, a globally recognized brand who essentially helps a lot of war-torn places like Ukraine and Haiti. And essentially, she's our alumni. She's great. She's brilliant. There's a lot we can learn from her. There's also an Omer Golan who came to us with Outer Nets, and he just exited his company about a year ago. Oh, wow. So, and then there's another guy, Vikram Chopra, who's now in Toronto. He used to run a company with us as an alumni called Gift Genie. And now he runs another company. I forgot the name of it, but they just raised about $15 million for that company. So I think it has to do something with 5G, and they work with the Canadian government and leaders and stuff like that. So,
Mark,
yeah.
I want to remind everyone, Mark is the managing director of, I guess we're going to do a little transition here, 2020 Startups, which is becoming the New York Startup School, an idea that I absolutely love. He's also the head of digital transformation at Gracie Mansion Conservancy, a place close to my heart because I grew up right next to it. But I think the idea of what you're doing, pulling a lot of these things together in New York City, is great, Mark. And I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the Accelerator.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
And I want to thank everybody out there for listening. And remember, we'll be back with another podcast before you know it.